The laughter came first, sharp, public, humiliating. In the middle of a spotless bank lobby, a 90-year-old black woman stood still while powerful eyes judged her worth in seconds. People watched. No one stepped in. Authority leaned forward not to help, but to shame. Then the voice cut through the room, loud and mocking. "This isn't a place for people like you." Silence followed. What no one realized in that moment was simple. This humiliation had just triggered a reckoning the man in charge would never recover from. Comment where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. Subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Serena Bennett lived a life shaped by discipline, not comfort. At 90 years old, her mornings followed the same quiet rhythm she had kept for decades. Wake early, dress neatly, move with purpose. She believed routine was a form of protection in a world that had rarely offered her any. Her clothes were modest, her posture upright, her presence calm. Not fragile, not confused, grounded. The bank she walked into that day was part of her routine, yet it was never a place that welcomed her. The building itself spoke a language she knew: well-polished floors, guarded smiles, and an unspoken hierarchy that decided who deserved patience and who did not. Serena felt it the moment she crossed the threshold. Conversations softened, eyes lingered. The warmth reserved for others skipped right past her. This institution had been shaped by men like Charles Hayes, whose authority wasn't just enforced from his office, but embedded into the culture below him. Employees had learned the rules without ever seeing them written. Some customers mattered more. Some questions were inconvenient, and some people were better ignored. Janet knew those rules well. She followed them because hesitation had consequences. Serena waited quietly, observing. She had spent her life reading rooms like this, places where power hid behind politeness and cruelty disguised itself as policy. She remembered similar spaces from her youth, when men who looked like Charles Hayes' grandfather ran things without explanation or apology. The faces had changed. The behavior hadn't. Nearby, a voice whispered, low but clear, "She looks lost." Another answered just as softly, "Someone should handle it before there's a problem." Serena heard them. She always did. But her expression didn't change. She wasn't there to argue. She wasn't there to prove anything. She stood with the patience of someone who understood systems better than the people enforcing them. Above the lobby, Gerald Simmons worked in an office built on decisions that affected everyone below. He believed leadership meant responsibility, not entitlement. That belief had shaped his career, but it hadn't shaped everyone else's. Downstairs, the atmosphere tightened. The silence around Serena wasn't accidental. It was strategic, designed to make her uncomfortable, to make her leave. The system expected compliance, not resistance. Serena adjusted her grip on her cane and waited. She knew something most of them didn't. Moments like this never stayed small. They grew. And when they did, they exposed everyone involved. This situation, she knew, would not end quietly. The moment Serena stepped fully into the process, the tone around her shifted. What had begun as quiet judgment hardened into something deliberate. Time slowed in the lobby, not because nothing was happening, but because everyone was waiting to see how far authority would go. Serena Bennett stood composed, her presence steady against the pressure pressing in from every side. She wasn't rushing, she wasn't apologizing. That alone unsettled people. Charles Hayes noticed it immediately. From where he stood, he could sense the eyes of wealthy clients drifting toward the scene, curiosity mixing with impatience. He didn't like unpredictability. Control was his currency, and Serena's calm threatened it. He stepped forward, voice carrying across the room, sharp and dismissive. "We don't have time for games. This isn't how things work here." The words landed heavy. Conversations nearby died instantly. Janet felt her chest tighten as she watched the exchange. She knew the rules, knew how quickly situations like this could turn ugly when leadership felt challenged. Her instinct told her to intervene, to slow things down, but fear kept her rooted in place. She glanced at Serena, expecting hesitation. She saw none. Serena didn't respond right away. She simply waited, eyes steady, forcing the moment to stretch. That silence worked against Charles more than any argument could have. He mistook it for weakness and pressed harder. His posture straightened, confidence swelling as bystanders remained silent. He gestured towards security without looking at them, certain they would move when commanded. A murmur rolled through the crowd. Some people shifted uncomfortably. Others leaned in, entertained. Mrs. Catherine Vance watched closely, her expression a mix of superiority and amusement. She whispered just loud enough to be heard. "This is exactly why procedures exist. Some people don't know their place." The cruelty was casual, effortless, and no one challenged it. Serena felt the weight of decades pressing into that single moment. She had been spoken about, spoken over, dismissed like this before, by men who believed their titles made them untouchable. She adjusted her stance slightly, not in defiance, but in resolve. Her voice, when it came, was calm and measured. "I'm asking for a service, not permission." That sentence changed everything. Charles froze for half a second, surprised. Then his expression hardened. Being questioned in front of others wasn't something he tolerated. He took a step closer, lowering his voice, making it sound like a warning rather than a threat. "You should be careful how you speak to me." The tension in the room spiked. Janet swallowed hard. She could see the mistake forming. Authority pushing too far because it had never been challenged before. The system was revealing itself in real time, and it was ugly. Serena recognized the posture immediately. It reminded her of stories she'd buried deep, of men who looked like Charles Hayes's grandfather, who believed intimidation was leadership. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't step back. That refusal unsettled him more than anger ever could. Security shifted their weight, waiting for instruction. The silence from the crowd grew louder, complicit. No one defended Serena. No one questioned Charles. Power thrived in that quiet. Somewhere above the lobby, Gerald Simmons reviewed reports, unaware that a test of the bank's values was unfolding below. His name carried weight in this building, but at this moment, his absence was felt more than his presence. Charles turned slightly, ensuring the room heard him clearly, his confidence returning. "This is your last warning," he said. The message wasn't meant just for Serena. It was for everyone watching. A reminder of who controlled the space. Mrs. Vance smiled faintly, reassured by the display of dominance. To her, this was order being restored. To Janet, it felt like a line being crossed that couldn't be uncrossed. Serena exhaled slowly. She had not come looking for conflict, but she would not shrink to avoid it. She knew something Charles did not. Moments like this had consequences far beyond the room they happened in. Systems remembered their mistakes. So did people. As the pressure peaked, Serena lifted her chin slightly, her gaze unwavering. The balance of power hadn't shifted yet, but it was straining, cracking under its own arrogance. And the people watching had no idea how close they were to witnessing everything turn. The situation spiraled with frightening speed. What had started as humiliation now felt dangerous, heavy with consequence. Charles Hayes stood taller than ever, convinced the room still belonged to him. His authority had never been questioned this openly, and that belief hardened his resolve. He saw Serena not as a person, but as a problem that needed removing, quickly and publicly. Security shifted closer. The silence in the lobby tightened like a rope. Janet felt her pulse racing as she watched the scene unravel. This was no longer about policy or procedure. It was about power, and Charles intended to prove he still held it. His voice cut sharply through the tension. "Escort her out now." Gasps rippled through the room. Some people stepped back, others leaned forward. Mrs. Catherine Vance watched with folded arms, her expression firm, satisfied. To her, order was being restored. To Serena Bennett, it was the familiar face of injustice, resurfacing once again. Only this time, she did not lower her eyes. Serena's posture changed, not in panic, not in fear, but in certainty. She stood straighter, her presence filling the space without effort. Decades of restraint, patience, and preparation surfaced in that moment. Her voice carried, steady and unmistakable. "Are you certain you want to do this in front of witnesses?" The question unsettled Charles, just slightly, enough to irritate him. He scoffed, waving it off, convinced the room would back him as it always had. "You don't belong here," he snapped. "And this ends now." The injustice peaked there. Authority bearing down, the system closing ranks, bystanders frozen in place. It felt final. Absolute. Serena looked around the lobby one last time, taking in every face that had chosen silence. This was the moment systems expected surrender. Then the elevator doors opened. The sound was soft, almost unnoticeable, but the presence was not. Gerald Simmons stepped into the lobby with measured calm. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice. His eyes took everything in at once, the guards, the crowd, the tension, and Serena at the center of it all. The air shifted before anyone spoke. Charles felt it immediately. His confidence faltered, his breath catching as he turned. Gerald's name carried weight in this building, real weight, board-level weight, decision-making weight. And Gerald's gaze didn't linger on Serena. It locked directly onto Charles. "What's going on here?" Gerald asked quietly. The question landed like a crack in glass. Charles opened his mouth, words tumbling out too fast, too defensive. He tried to explain, to regain control, but the narrative slipped through his fingers. Gerald didn't look convinced. He didn't look amused. He walked past Charles without acknowledgement and stopped in front of Serena Bennett. For the first time, Serena smiled, not gently, but knowingly. Gerald's voice softened as he addressed her by name. The room froze. Every whisper died instantly. Janet's eyes widened. Mrs. Vance stiffened. The recognition alone was enough to fracture the illusion of control Charles had been clinging to. This was the power shift, but it wasn't complete yet. Gerald turned slowly, deliberately, back toward Charles Hayes. His tone changed, sharpened. "Step aside," he said. "This conversation doesn't involve you anymore." Charles's face drained of color. His authority evaporated in real time. He tried to speak, but his voice failed him. His hands trembled slightly as Gerald continued, laying out truths Charles couldn't outrun about Serena's history, her standing, her contributions, and the long shadow cast by the Hayes family legacy. Even the mention of his grandfather felt like a verdict. Phones came out. The crowd shifted. Mrs. Resch. Vance looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. Janet felt something break open inside her, relief mixed with shame. Then Gerald delivered the final blow, his words clear and irreversible. "You're done here." The room exhaled. Charles staggered back, stripped of authority, exposed in front of everyone he had once dominated. The power had fully shifted now, undeniable, permanent. Serena remained standing, unshaken, her silence louder than any victory speech. As security turned, not toward her, but toward him, the truth settled in the lobby like a weight no one could ignore. This wasn't just an incident anymore. It was accountability in motion. The fallout was immediate and unforgiving. Charles Hayes didn't walk out of that building with explanations or second chances. By the end of the day, his authority was stripped, his access revoked, and his name quietly removed from everything that once protected him. The same system he had weaponized turned cold, efficient, and final. Investigations began. Accounts were reviewed. Patterns emerged. What happened in that lobby was no longer an incident. It was evidence. Serena Bennett remained exactly where she was, steady, composed, unbroken. Validation didn't arrive as applause. It arrived as accountability. Decisions were reversed. Policies were rewritten. People who once avoided her eyes now stood back, watching, forced to confront the harm they had helped normalize. Dignity was restored not through sympathy, but through truth. Gerald Simmons ensured the outcome couldn't be softened or buried. Oversight was enforced. Leadership was changed. The message was unmistakable. Power without respect would no longer survive here. The building didn't feel the same afterward, and it shouldn't have. Systems don't evolve quietly when they've been exposed. In the days that followed, Serena returned to her life unchanged in spirit, but expanded in impact. Her quiet work, long invisible to people like Charles Hayes, became impossible to ignore. Scholarships increased. Programs grew. Doors opened for people who had never been meant to walk through them. One of those doors led to Marcus Simmons. Years earlier, Marcus had been a student the system overlooked, brilliant, determined, and unseen. Serena Bennett saw him when others didn't. She invested in his education when the world offered excuses instead. Now, his success stood as living proof of what dignity multiplied could achieve. His name appeared not as a statistic, but as a future rewritten. Serena didn't celebrate what happened in the lobby. She didn't need revenge. What mattered was what followed. The lives redirected, the power redistributed, the silence broken. Racism doesn't collapse when it's exposed. It collapses when it's confronted and replaced with action. Charles Hayes lost his position, his influence, and the illusion that authority protects cruelty. Serena Bennett gained nothing she hadn't already earned, only recognition she had never needed. This story doesn't end with comfort. It ends with responsibility. Because the question isn't whether injustice still happens in places like this. The question is, who benefits from staying silent when it does? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and accountability. And don't forget to hit like. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.